Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we have a 13-game slate here on Tuesday. We're recording this before the national championship on Monday, as we've got plenty of lines up. In this video, we are going to be bringing you the Philadelphia 76ers playing host to the Boston Celtics. Nate will run through all that stuff for you guys. But in the meantime, I want to remind you to like and subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along. We're bringing you a couple of videos in our player props each and every weekday, continuing through the rest of this NBA season and postseason. Also head to thelines.com. That's where we're putting up all these picks as well, up on the site there. And we also have that odds finder tool I tell you about every time, so you can make sure you're getting the best juice back on all these bets you're making in the NBA this season. Nate, let's get into our game here. A couple picks from each of us in this Philly-Boston matchup.
Yeah, it's pretty much open as a pick 'em. I mean, I guess Philly minus 2.5 in some places. Boston getting points. Boston plus 120 on the money line is where I would go here. The total is opened at 232. But I mean, it's more just like trying to read the room here with the Celtics. Is like, clearly there was a big boredom factor as we headed down the stretch there where they just couldn't beat the Houston Rockets of all teams. And then, you know, once they get that kind of matchup where it's like, all right, what do you have against a top tier team in the East? It was the second biggest blowout of the season, just utter annihilation. And sure, the Bucks were tired a little bit. Giannis was going as hard as he could, but it was just like literally dissecting and picking apart the top defense in the league over the last couple months. The Sixers, I'm trying to read the room with them. I mean, you look at last 6 games for both of these teams. They are headed in the opposite direction in terms of, I mean, defense, first of all, 27th in defense for the Sixers versus first for Boston. The Sixers are allowing the 5th most 3-point attempts and 8th most makes in that span. And they've lost 4 of 6. They were all on the road, though. I mean, they are still extremely effective at home. It's just like a question of how much effort are they going to put into this one? What is to be gained from beating the Celtics right now versus what is to be lost by even playing Joel Embiid 40 minutes, which I don't think they're going to do. And the last time these teams played, it took 41 points in 40 minutes from Embiid for the Sixers to only lose by 3. Harden also played 41 minutes. He's been struggling. His last 5 amidst the Achilles issue right now, 13 points per game, 10 assists to 4 turnovers, 100 offensive rating. He's shooting 34% from the field. And, since he had a really nice game in the opener against Boston, but also couldn't defend, right? Both the Jays had 35 in that one because Maxey was still starting. And that's the issue always with the Sixers is they can't play both those guys at the same time necessarily against a team with massive wings like the Celtics. Big reason the Celtics have won 4 straight against the Sixers, and a big reason they've gotten an incredible shot diet against this team when they played. I mean, the last couple meetings, Maxey's coming off the bench, but still the Celtics shooting nearly 50% from 3 and like doubling up the Sixers on threes, getting doubled up at the free throw line. But again, last 6 games, number 1 defensive rating, number 2 limiting free throws. They're number 1 on the road for the entire season. And they should have Rob and Al Horford here for this matchup where, they beat the Sixers without both those guys and with Jalen getting a broken face in early February. Then went ahead and beat them with neither of them. And, you look at the numbers when you have Rob, Al, the Jays, and Derek White, and not just Marcus Smart, who they played, and that's kind of why that game was close, to be honest. I think all the chatter Joe Mazzulla's heard on sports radio, and there's a lot of smart guys out in Boston. There's a lot of not so smart on sports radio, but the smart ones have been, lining up to say like Derek White just needs to play more. Like just look at these numbers, use your eyes and play him more. And I think they have found something with those lineups. He will continue to play more. And it's just a case of just incredible depth from the Celtics that if they have their focus, like there's nothing you can do with this team. You just hope they miss threes because they're going to get good shots every time down the floor. And if they hit over 15, 16 threes, which has been their diet, they're winning the game.
Yeah, and I mean, that's going to be the case with them forever right now in terms of the variance of their threes. Are they hitting them? If yes, I mean, to be honest, if yes, it's probably going to be a tough game for the other team, and you're going to get some blowouts of good teams like you saw last game. And then if no, like they still have an opportunity to win if they have sort of the defensive, presence of Robert Williams III. I think that's huge, and I think that was a big part of that Bucks game. You can make the argument he's more important against the Bucks for the Celtics than he is against the 76ers. And I wouldn't have said that until I started to look at some of Joel Embiid's stats versus this team, and it's a lot more correlated to whether or not Al Horford plays in terms of Joel Embiid's success against the Celtics team. And to be honest, a lot of Marcus Smart as well in terms of being able to come down from his spot and guard out there as well, even though sometimes he's the defender on Harden. Sometimes he's a little bit more, free safety and able to help on Embiid, and he's playing on someone who can't shoot so that he can be the help defender. My main point here is Robert Williams is more important as the backup to all of that against the Bucks. Joel is not necessarily coming at the rim with the speed that Giannis is, requiring a shot blocker to come up. Like Robert Williams and a lot of shot blockers, if they want to come over and double Joel, then they have the opportunity to, and he's become much better at passing out of it, but he hasn't been as successful against this team. And that's a big part of why I do believe in the Celtics, is that even if they're not going to be as potent, which, come on, man, I don't know how they could be as potent from deep as they were against Milwaukee. I know they could come close still, and they're capable of it, but regardless of if they come close or do that, just as important and more so in terms of if they're going to win the title is their defense. And it's been incredible for the last roughly 15 games. It's been the second best in terms of the rating. They have been playing at a decently fast pace, but this Sixers team has actually been playing at the slowest pace in the league in the last 3-4 weeks of the season. I'm going to move on to my pick in this one in terms of going under, and it's not quite as strong as in terms of I would agree with you with Boston, and I like the juice you get there on a money line bet for the Celtics to win a game that, by the way, they need. I should just mention that as my last point for supporting you there in the money line. Like, they have 2 games to try to cover to get the 1 seed against his Bucks in 4 games. Not going to be easy, but possible. Even though the Bucks now have a few more easier games left, it's feasible. The 76ers need to cover 3 games to get over to win the Atlantic here against the Celtics and overtake them. They would have a shot if they win this game, and obviously now they're 2 back with 3 to play, but that's still a lot less likely mathematically. My main point being, I think you could see the 76ers fold if things get a little bit out of hand, the way that the Bucks kind of just folded and were like, look, we just need to win out and win 3 of our next 4 basically, and we can still get this 1 seed. We don't need to be as concerned with it. And I think the 76ers would fold in a similar manner. And then I'll just move on to the under. And another reason that would actually support the under is if this game does get out of hand, I mean, do the 76ers score 105 points? Even if the Celtics get to 120, 121 and they're hitting, wouldn't they start to sit some guys? So I know you can be scared of a 130 outburst from the Celtics once again, but the 76ers have been much better at defending the 3-point line, not necessarily than the Bucks, but in their own right. Obviously, D'Anthony Melton being a huge reason for that, and then PJ Tucker too, and the fact that even Tyrese Maxey's been out there a lot in the last. He didn't play very much in these first couple meetings against the Celtics, but he's been playing a lot lately. That would be the only other counter argument to an under, but still, like I said, this team's playing at the slowest pace with Maxey playing 36 minutes per game is the 76ers. So 3 of these last 4 went under, and the only time it went over in this matchup like that was because it was the first game of the season. It was just a lot of 3-point barrages. I'm not really sure which team. I mean, the Celtics were bad at defense for the first month of the season, or at least nowhere near what they were capable of and what they turned things around to and how good they are now. So I think that the defense of the Celtics, combined with the fact that I don't know how much the 76ers need this game, and they're better at guarding what the Celtics do. So it's a much more likely bet there for the under than the over in this one.
Yeah, I agree totally that 232 is way too high. You would expect a game at least 227 or lower when these teams meet because of some of the slugfests we've seen. And that's with, the steady free throw parade for Joel Embiid, who, like I said, what is to be lost by trying to bang him in the paint right now when you had to sit him against the Joker, and then the Joker sits out an entire week. So basically gives the MVP to Embiid, and he no longer has to go out there on a mission. You looked at, his last 3 that he's actually played, he's kind of been chilling with 32 minutes per game, 26 points. It's not the massive outburst that you see in recent games, and it's why the Sixers are no longer looking dangerous in the fourth quarter. Since the All-Star break, they were the number 1 offense in net in the fourth, but their last 6, again, 23rd in net rating. versus Boston in their last 6, third in defense and net rating, which is definitely going to help you with that pace. Philly's playing under 90 in terms of their pace in the fourth. These teams, I mean, Boston does like to come out hot and score a lot, but then if it's still close in the fourth, they slow it down. So, I mean, even though they've gone over in 5 straight on the road as Boston, I think when these two teams get together, it does kind of get slowed down. And I wouldn't be surprised, if Harden actually doesn't even play in this one. If he, he's been missing games. He does duck the moment a lot. I mean, not that this is a big spot for the Sixers. It's just I would actually feel more comfortable betting the Celtics and the under if Harden plays, because he's been playing and struggling. He's been shooting poorly, turning the ball over. But yeah, either way, I think the Celtics are going to be able to win this one. I have slightly less confidence in the under, just because there's been a lot of variance. When you shoot that many threes, there's going to be. But yeah, I do think the under is the better play.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if you want to just, quantify it, like much more likely that much more comfortable with that money line and more of like a unit on that, maybe a half on the under, just to bring another bet into play if you wanted it. But definitely a lot more conviction there with the Celtics in this one, and just the way that I think this game might turn out. Look, don't underestimate the role players who will bring it for the 76ers, and they are good. But if it's coming down to, the Celtics needing to take care of business and are focused, like you said, like what is the mindset of each of these teams coming in? Just see like the starters for the Celtics being so focused that I'm not quite concerned who is also focused on the 76ers, just because it'll be their role players. So Nate, let's go through a couple of the lines that we've got here for this Pellies and Kangs game.
Yeah, we're opening as Pelicans only -2.5 at home. Don't yet have a total up as we're waiting here on Monday night, but you got to figure it's going to be pretty high for the Kings, even though they do tend to go under on the road. And even though the Pelicans have the number 1 scoring defense since the All-Star break, allowing 108 per game, it's pretty easy to me to say like Pelicans to win here. I mean, especially as you said in the intro, like losing to the Spurs in overtime when the Spurs are now +18 in almost every single game they play is eyebrow raising. Does that, kind of jerk the Kings back into focus? Perhaps if you think that way, then we're looking at an over because the Kings, their only way to compete is to ramp up the pace and to score a lot. And it's funny that I say compete because they're the freaking 3 seed, but that honestly, their defense is that bad that they just need to be scoring, and they're the number 1 offense in the league. But a lot of the things they do don't seem like they're going to work so good against the Pels, who, let's not forget, when they finally got Brandon Ingram back in the lineup, game 1, I believe, back when with him back, beat down the Kings by 32 points. So, and it's not like they can't handle this matchup. It's a tough matchup for Domantas Sabonis against his big Lithuanian brother, Jonas Valanciunas, and the Pels in general. I mean, Jonas even missed one of the recent meetings, and Domantas still struggled because the Pels have, Jackson Hayes, Willie Hernan-Gomez. They have size everywhere. Larry Nance, let's not forget, is also a really good and versatile defender. So they're, in addition to allowing the fewest points, they're also allowing the 2nd fewest assists, 8th fewest paint points, and 5th fewest fast break points, and 4th best 3-point percentage since the break are the Pels, and even better in their last 8, where they've won 7 of those, and they've had to, right? I mean, they climbed their way back in, just like last season, really just finishing strong. And even though Zion might not be ready until the play-in or playoffs or wherever it might be, I mean, that is kind of a ray of hope for them. And there's just so many implications. Obviously, anytime they play here, whether they fall into the play-in or they climb all the way to the 6th seed, like every single game the rest of the way is going to have that kind of do or die feel. And at home, with that crowd at your back, versus a Kings team that's, we're just happy to be here, folks. They made it to the playoffs. They threw a party. I do think they do need to get right here after that loss against the Spurs, but I just don't think it's a great matchup for them. I guess just a really big physical Pelicans team that is tough to score on down low.
Yeah, and look, love you Kings, and love the everything. I mean, they're this season's darling for sure. But I would say that the last 8 games for both of these teams are pretty telling of what you can expect coming into this one with their mindsets. The Pelicans haven't beaten great teams in their last 8 when they're going 7-1. Let's be clear, they're beating the good teams that they're playing. Like the Nuggets don't have Jokic in their game, and they've beaten the Clippers twice. That's probably their two most impressive wins, and their 7 wins over their last 8. And like, who the hell knows what the Clippers are doing? I'm not trying to guess. Sometimes they win and sometimes they don't. Sometimes Kawhi plays, sometimes he plays 28 minutes. So like whatever's going on with them, they're still somehow in the 5 seed and in the driver's seat of that, right ahead of the Dubs, even though they have the same record. So, but more importantly, like it doesn't matter. They're coming out and handling business. I mean, they're winning those games by 17 points in the last 8. So it's not like they're, hanging on by a thread. They're like coming out and being like, this is a game we're going to take from start to finish. The only one they couldn't handle was the Dubs in Golden State, and they had a double-digit lead in that game and probably just lost their legs at the end of a very long road trip that they were still winning all those games on that road trip. So, I mean, we both are just talking with so much admiration about this Pelicans team because of the hustle that they're bringing. And the Kangs, I'm not going to go ahead and say they're like not trying because they're also playing. They had everybody in that loss to the Spurs. They gave up 13 threes. Dougie McDermott there, Dougie McFresh getting 30. And then Champagny, Julian Champagny, go ahead and look him up since I'm sure not as many of you are familiar with him, dropped 26 on him in his coming out party because they were just sort of watching guys do things, man, to be honest. And at times, their defense actually, it's not necessarily a lack of hustle. The Kings are, if you look at some of the hustle points on defense, they are stopping teams in the fast break. They're getting back. They're not turning the ball over and allowing transition points off of that. So they're playing like smart basketball and like trying on defense, but it's bad, especially when DeMontis is your backup. And I think there's something to be said. Your anchor of your defense. I mean, backup, like, that's a tough
Backstop.
center matchup. Rest. Yeah, exactly. Backstop. Thank you. And it's not a very strong one. But more importantly, like, I just think down the stretch right now for this team, they don't know how to win. They've got Harrison Barnes, who's the only guy who's been on a championship team as the 4th best player and not necessarily a very vocal one, especially because he never had to, playing alongside Draymond Green on those teams. And so who else do you have to turn to go, this is how you stay focused down the stretch, fellas. Like, this is how you close this out, right? They did an incredible job coming back from the All-Star break. Had a 9-game win streak in there. We're winning like 15 of 18, have been one of the best teams in the league since the All-Star break record-wise. But those wins were coming at the end of February, early March, and then it's been a little bit more of a downward slope for them since then, because I think a part of that, like I said, how do we make sure we bring it every night in these games down the stretch? And now they're at a place where they're 3 games out of second, and they, if they had beaten the Spurs, they would have been 2. They had a really good shot at it, and they blew it. And so at this point, I'm not sure how much they need this game. You have to look at that mindset and go, yeah, Pels to pull this one off. I mean, the money line at minus 140, but you might as well take the 2 points, as we really, really both like that. And then, like you said, the second bet that I think we're both throwing out here is definitely an under. I can guess where that might be for you guys and see if it comes out that way. But like around 236, 237, I still kind of like an under. I think that might be the lower end of what we get. We'll see how much the odds makers here value this Pels defense against the Kings offense. But holding the Kings to 123 in Sacramento, I say holding because that's about what they average, and then holding them to, what was it, 104 in their second matchup with everybody, and was on the road in this building where we're about to be. It was a blowout at that point, and it got to like 240 because the Pels put up 136 points, which they're capable of doing here. But I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a defensive focus for them against this Kings team, knowing that you can score without much difficulty on this team. If you can stop them from getting to 120, you're probably going to be able to win.
Yeah, like we said last week when we were looking at Pelicans Nuggets, it's like I'm taking an under in Pelicans game until further notice. Like, they're playing defense, they're playing at a 97 pace, not a lot of explosive scoring, just a lot of like mid-range operation from Ingram and McCollum. So, I mean, granted, the Kings do tend to play these shootouts, but they also tend to go under as road dogs, right? 13-5 in that situation. And the Pels 17-10 to the under as home faves here. They're also 25-13 straight up. So that's what we're talking about with the home crowd at your back in this kind of environment. And sure, I mean, Jokic didn't play in that Nuggets game we're talking about, and we were saying like the under even more, but to hold the Nuggets to 88 points, I mean, to hold any NBA team, even the G League Blazers, who they held to 90 last week as well, is very impressive. I mean, it definitely indicates like a style of play, a throwback style, even if you will, where they're actually not going to get up and down, where they're going to make you beat them in half court and make you beat them in the weird margins, like not in the paint or from the three, which is really all the Kings do, right? They're dead last in mid-range points since the All-Star break on the road, 27th in paint points percentage. And like I said, Domantas Sabonis has not been able to score on Valanciunas. That's a little preview for our player props video. So with that being said, let's get on to that one.
Yeah, let's wrap it up and talk about that. And yeah, I think you said it there at the end too. Some pretty big trend numbers there showing how good the Pels are at home this season, 25-13 versus 15-25 on the road, which another reason I think they really want to make sure they can try to get this 7th seed, right? And they're tied with the Lakers for the 7th seed. They're a half game back of the Dubs for the 6th seed. A win will tie them with the Dubs record wise. They don't own the tiebreaker there as Golden State does. But they can probably jump the Lakers and own that 7th seed outright, and then they get a chance to play the Lakers at home in that 7-8 matchup. Or if they should lose that game either way, they need to avoid that 9 seed where they would not be guaranteed 2 home games. They might have to win a game on the road to get into the playoffs. And with the way that they play at home, man, they're definitely going to be gunning for a win tonight, and I think we can bank on that. So Nate, let's go ahead, just jump right into your first NBA play-up prop for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the Wolves coming off a Sunday loss to Portland, which is, really got to hurt in this tight playoff race. But Anthony Edwards looked like he was back. I mean, he's been back for 5 games now from the ankle injury and been wildly inconsistent. But he had 37 points on a 43% usage rate, granted, against Portland. As I said, no D, also no NBA players in the lineup right now. Last time out against Brooklyn, though, a team that it has struggled against shooting guards all year, 32 points on a 30% usage rate. His 5 career games against Brooklyn, 25 points per game, 31% usage. So that's where the prop is 24.5 points. It's good odds on the over at FanDuel. Also even better odds for him to hit 3 threes because he's kind of struggled from deep. Like I mentioned, 5 since coming back. He averages out to 31% from deep and averages 22 points per game, but he's had these huge spike games. It's almost a situation where you're willing to take an alternate line and say like, whoa, I thought Ant would be 27.5 points, especially in this matchup, like right there with Mikal Bridges, who gave the Wolves the business in that game, and that's why Ant had to come right back and get 32. So I mean, I think this prop is a little low. Brooklyn allows the second most points to shooting guards, and they're up to 31 points per game to shooting guards in their last 7. So obviously, I know you're a fan. You're nodding your head. So obviously, you're on board with Ant.
I am. I'm on board with Ant. And to be honest, man, I'm on board with getting ahead of fading Mikal Bridges as one of the best defensive players of the NBA. Hear me out. I know his nickname is Mikal the Destroyer, but remember when Kawhi Leonard was one of the best defensive players in the NBA? It's not that he's not anymore. It's that he doesn't have to be because he can just throw up 28 points a game. And it's funny what it'll do to your psyche on defense when you're like, I'm not as concerned if you score here because I'll just go get it back if I have to. And Mikal is turning into a 3-level scorer that we all need to start respecting a bit more than just the guy getting the stats for Brooklyn, because who else is going to get the stats? Like, this is an NBA player getting NBA points. And I'm using that as logic to say Ant's going to come right back at him. He's one of the most dependable egos in the NBA that you can rely upon to take shit seriously when he's getting in a mano sort of style matchup with a guy. And Bridges has been playing shooting guard for this team. So he may be guarding him. He may not, depending on if they want to use their, pre-Kawhi guy on the best player on the other team, or if they're already going to start not necessarily matching him up. But Brooklyn's very good at defense in other areas. And Ant's not the type of player that I think they're going to be quite as good against. So I'm with it, as you saw me nodding vigorously with you. I'm going to go under here on Domas. We kind of talked about that. Domantas Sabonis in the Sacramento Kings video against this Pelicans team that they're playing on Tuesday night. And we talked about fading him a bit. At 20.5 points is his, the under would be the best play there on DraftKings at -120. I also really like the PRA, although he has gotten boards here and there against this Pelly's team. It's and not nearly as close to this point total as of late against the Pelicans. But either way, the points, rebounds, and assists under, if he gets under 40 there, that's minus 110. And so it's a little bit better juice there than you're going to find for just the points. He's failed to hit all of either of those in his last 4 versus New Orleans here. And 3 of those were with Sac, 1 with the Pacers, 15 points a game, 12 boards, and then 7 assists, but a minus 52 in that time because he's playing against his big bro, as you mentioned, his fellow Lithuanian, Jonas Valanciunas, averaging 13 points against him in his career, under 10 boards and 4 assists in about 27 minutes. And part of that, I would imagine, is because he's getting big boy down low and getting a bit of foul trouble as well against Joe Val. So look, we also just mentioned this New Orleans defense. It's good all over the place. Let's be very clear, but like it's pretty much clamps down low, especially, it's the number 1 D overall, 6th fewest rebounds to centers, 10th fewest points, 8th fewest points in the paint, but actually number 1 in their last 8 games in terms of limiting points in the paint, and then number 2 in both limiting second chance points. You can't get fast break points against them. You can't really get rebounds against them right now either. They have the number 1 defensive rebound percentage in their last 8. So this Pelly's team is just we keep kvelling over them, to use a Yiddish word, because they're just looking awesome on defense, and it's fun to watch them put the clamps on teams.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, Joe Val didn't even play in one of these last 3 matchups for him against the Pels, and he still struggled because they have other bigs. They have Jackson Hayes, Willie Hernan-Gomez, Larry Nance, guys who can just get into him. And also, you're wondering about the motivation for the Kings. Like, there's nothing much to be gained, like we said, with the Sixers in the 3rd spot. I mean, in terms of trying to go out and win this game, other than play the right way. Try to finish the season with some momentum, but I would rather take the under on that than assume that, DeMontis is going to force anything. That's not his game anyway.
Yeah.
So 20.5 points is a lot against the number 1 scoring D right now since the break. And a similar feeling here. Against the Bucks defense, Denny Avdija to get 15.5 points or 23.5 points of rebounds. I'm going under on both of that here. In his last 7, he started to get a ton of minutes and usage because Kristaps and Brad Beal are out and Kuzma's been out. But he's a minus 25, so that's not ideal. But 15 points per game, 8 rebounds per game. So he's right at this average. But you look at what happens when he faces a packet-in defense, or 2 of them in a row, Orlando and the Knicks, down to 7.5 points and 4.5 boards, shooting 23%. And has a 62 offensive rating, same amount of turnovers as assists. He's not a shooter. Like, I don't know what, he necessarily does really well, except, gets in the paint. He's a kind of a connective playmaker. He's basically, what I'm saying is he's playing ahead of his skis here. He's supposed to be like a number 1 or 1A option right now for the rest everybody Wizards. And he had a nice 17.6 rebound line in 31 minutes off the bench against the Bucks in March when Kristaps and Beal were still playing. So now you're going to ask him to go in there and go toe-to-toe with Giannis, from the start and see how that goes. In a career against the Bucks, he averages 10 points. He has a 106 offensive rating, poor shooting splits, because he's a classic guy that the Bucks defense likes to identify and be like, we'd like him to shoot from the perimeter. We're not going to let him inside. Or go ahead and try Brook Lopez if you want. But, if you can't hit a jump shot reliably, sorry, son, you're not scoring in this one.
That's fair. I'm using the exact same logic here to pick Giannis to go over, by the way. And I think there's a heavy correlation in that sort of power forward position that Avdija is supposed to be playing as more of a, like you said, slash and glue guy in that sense, much more so than primary scorer. So the points for sure, I think you can go under on and feel pretty good about the points and rebounds, as well as mostly because it's the Bucks. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and talk about Giannis for a minute. And Chris Middleton is out in this game. To be clear, also, we've shot a video in the last week, and then a guy was ruled out as we were talking, and then another guy was ruled, and then he was ruled in when we weren't talking. It happened the other day with SGA, who was just ruled in all of a sudden, even though all the injury reports said he was out. So my main point is Middleton is out, and that's a big part of this bet of why I like Giannis, not just the 30.5 points or even if Middleton's out, the 48.5 PRA. Now, if Middleton plays, I like, he's out, but he could play. If he does play, I still like the points no matter what, the 30.5 points. If he doesn't play, but I'm sorry, if he does play, though, I don't really like the 48.5 PRA in terms of points, rebounds, and assists combined, because he doesn't get the assists when Middleton plays. And that's a big part of why I also want to throw out a triple-double at plus 750 for Giannis against this Washington Wizards team that he loves playing dimes up against, and because without Chris Middleton, he gets a lot of dimes. He's expected to do a bunch more. He knows Drew is really his main other scorer, and he needs to do a bit more than and be a bit more of a ball handler rather than just someone who's off ball and getting put into good positions to score with his skill set. So, I mean, his last 3 without Middleton, he's put up 33 points, 11 boards, and 10 assists, and that's all in 31 minutes. So obviously those per 36 numbers are even better. His last 7 with Middleton, he's looking at just 5 assists per game. So he's obviously, like I said, becoming much more of a playmaker. He's got 3 triple doubles in the last 4 games that he's played without Chris Middleton. So the plus 750 in a spot where he's done this, gotten that triple double, like I said, 75% of the time in the last 4 games, it seems like it's much more worth it. Like, also just this Washington team, awful against power forwards all over the place all season, even worse in the last 7. And that's why Giannis has averaged 35 a game, 13 boards, and 9 assists in his last 4 versus this team, including that 55-point outburst, by the way, earlier this season.
Yeah, I mean, it dovetails right into what I'm talking about with Deni Avdija, is that I don't think the Wizards have the personnel. They have guys playing out of position, ahead of schedule, whatever you want to call it. The question is, will it be a blowout? But, it hasn't really mattered for Giannis. Like, if he gets 31 minutes, he's scoring 31 points. Like, even in that Celtics beatdown, he had 24 points in 25 minutes. He was basically the only guy on the Bucks, like, trying or being aggressive after it got out of hand. He has no off switch. He will go after points, rebounds, and assists, and the Bucks need to win a couple more games to hold off those Celtics, who, by the way, fell into a trap against these Wizards before playing the Bucks. So I think Giannis will set the tone, and even if he gets pulled in the third quarter, he's probably going to put up his stats before then.
Yeah. This is probably this is the easiest game they have left. They can't lose this game. If they want to win 3 of 4 to guarantee themselves the 1 seed, they could win 2 of 4, potentially still get it, but they win 3 of 4 and they guarantee themselves that 1 seed. I think they do care about it, despite how much it didn't seem like they care about it when they were unable to score 100 points against the Celtics. But this Washington Wizards team ain't the Celtics. So feeling pretty good about Yanni in this one. And that is all the time we have for you in this one. So make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Also got a couple game videos up for you on this Tuesday night slate, so check those out as well. And until we see you next, happy betting.